Welcome to Preparing for AI, the AI podcast for everybody, with your hosts Jimmy Rhodes and me, Matt Cartwright. We explore the human and social impacts of AI, looking at the impact on jobs, AI and sustainability, and most importantly, the urgent need for safe development of AI, governance and alignment. Looking for some happiness, but there is only loneliness to find. Jump to the left, turn to the right, looking upstairs and looking behind. Welcome to Preparing for AI with me, Smurvish D. Wool.
And me, Trevor Herndon.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
I'm really tired this week.
I was going to tell people that to start.
I'm wrecked. Yeah.
Jimmy's tired. I've come to return the podcast and found him asleep. He's literally just woken up. He has just got back from South Africa and New York, where you've been doing some AI research.
In the Outback, safari place.
You were trying to find places in the world that were untouched by AI, right? So you went to New York.
Yeah.
And then you went to South Africa.
Other way around.
Have they been touched by AI?
South Africa felt very much like it has not. New York, actually, I've never been to the States before at all. It felt very familiar and not very AI-ish.
Have you been touched by AI?
Yeah, definitely.
Were you touched by AI on your trip?
Not inappropriately.
Well, anyway, welcome to Preparing for AI. And today's episode is not officially a roundup episode. I don't know why it's not officially one. I think only because the one we released 2 weeks ago was. No, it wasn't 2 weeks ago. It was ages ago, actually. But this is a roundup episode. So we're just going to do the usual kind of looking at the latest AI news. There's been quite a lot.
Yeah, there's loads to round up, actually.
So should we talk about Gemini 2.5?
Okay. Just off the top of your head. So I think I was going to do this one. Gemini 2.5. So yet again, and we say this almost every roundup, to be honest, but yet again, there's a new LLM at the top of the leaderboards.
So let me just say, because it happened so quickly that when you came back, the first time I saw you, and we said, "Oh, we need to do an episode," and you told me that Gemini 2.5 was the best model, and I was like, "Oh, really? Oh, I didn't know." I mean, it's like, we used to know every time. Now it was just like, I don't know. And I sort of don't really, not I don't care, but it's like, it sort of seems irrelevant because by the time this goes out, it might not be.
No, it's true. I mean, to explain, what's been at the top of the leaderboards recently. So Grok 3.
Well, DeepSeek was the first one to kind of shake it up, wasn't it?
DeepSeek, the thinking model. So that was all this year as well. And we're in March. In
3.7 Claude, possibly, or roundabout.
3.7 was briefly at the very top for specific use cases. I think the difference with... So there's been the thinking model revolution recently, which has happened basically over the last couple of months. I think Gemini 2.5 is a little bit different in that it's actually basically is top of all the benchmarks. So Claude 3.7 was the best model for coding, but wasn't necessarily better in other areas. Gemini 2.5, so it's a model by Google. That Google have been pretty quiet, but we've said for a long time that they're one of these companies that potentially are just going to do something like this.
Bizarre to call them like the dark horse, but it kind of feels like that, doesn't it?
But Gemini 2.5 has been, and when we talk about top of the leaderboard, just to sort of clarify a little bit, so there's something called LLM Arena for people who aren't familiar, and this is basically where humans use these models, but you don't know which model you're using, so it's all like a blind test, and then humans ask the same question and get given different answers, and then choose which one they think is the best. And so Gemini 2.5 was this mystery model for a while on LLM Arena, and they tend to release them a little bit earlier there as well. Gemini was topping all the charts there, and then they released it, and then you found out it was top of all these benchmarks. And so it's literally, I think there's 8 different benchmarks around human type reasoning, natural language processing, coding, that kind of stuff. And Gemini just is the best at all of them.
And it's free.
And it's completely free.
At the moment, I guess we don't know how long that lasts, but at the moment it's free, isn't it?
It's completely free. Yeah, this is the thing about it. So I was quite impressed because we're Claude fans. There's no secret there. I've been using Claude 3.7 for doing coding and all this stuff, and this model came out again, sort of just out of nowhere. And when I went to try it, it's really good, but it's also really fast. It's like much faster than Claude. Probably, at least 2 or 3 times faster.
At reasoning or non-reasoning is this?
This is thinking.
Reasoning
Everything it does,
okay.
yeah. So the specific use case I've been using LLMs for the most recently, and where I need the best one is coding using Cursor, which I talked about on a previous episode, and for coding up like an entire website, and actually Cursor hasn't even been optimized for Gemini yet. It's just significantly quicker than Claude. Like Claude, when you're doing stuff like that, it can take quite a while. And this Gemini model's like incredibly fast. So yeah, if you want to check out the cutting edge models, do a quick search for Google Gemini. I think it's like 2.5 Pro.
Pro, yeah.
Yeah, and you can I think you go to it's like a workshop type thing. It's not like a typical ChatGPT type interface, and you can use it there. And it's multimodal. Like it can, I haven't even had a go with it, but there is an option to stream your desktop to it as well, which looks pretty interesting. I think you basically do almost like a screen share, like you're sharing your desktop, and I would imagine you can chat with it about what's going on your desktop in real time.
So what? So almost agentic.
So I don't think it can interact with it in terms of being agentic, but it can view it. So I presume it can like solve problems with you in real time based on what you're looking at on your screen. I presume. I haven't tried it actually. So
yeah, I mean, when we said a minute ago that we sort of called, or I called it a dark horse, and I was thinking back. Probably a month ago, we recorded the episode where we looked at like the best models at the moment, and I remember specifically calling Google the kind of forgotten model, and we didn't really talk about it much, which was appropriate because at the time, I mean, I guess the thing is, it was never that Gemini was a bad model. It was just that there was nothing. It had never been the first one, so it had always come out, and there was already good models, so it didn't do anything different. It never kind of had anything that seemed to make it stand out. But we always thought that Google had, because they've got the whole kind of ecosystem, that it was likely that at some point, if they were not going to be the best model, like I think we said at one point, like Anthropic, we saw potential problems for because they were not big enough and they didn't have enough of an ecosystem there to sort of build on. I'm not sure if that's the case, because actually it seems like because they have a lot of their revenue through coding and through the API, actually they have got their kind of niche to some degree. But with Google,
well, they've got Amazon backing them.
Yeah, well. True. Yeah, it's not like they're a little startup, is it? But it does feel like with Google now, like at this point, it's like, right, they're banging it now. And I kind of feel like they've got their act together. Like it was also the issues they had. Remember the whole kind of woke thing where they had the images of black Nazis and all kinds of weird historical images where they were using. I mean, as a black Nazi thing's a bit weird, because I don't know that there weren't black Nazis. Like that's not necessarily a thing that didn't exist. But I know it was basically trying to be too diverse in the way that it
was generating diverse images of historical figures. So you could ask it for a image of a red Indian, and it would give you a white version of one, and then equally you could have black Nazis. Interesting example, but yeah.
Well, that was the one that came up when I saw it.
Yeah,
but then the more when I said it and thought about it, I thought, well, actually, like there are black Nazis. There are Nazis of all colours, so that's not actually historically incorrect.
No, it's probably an unusual.
It's an
example.
It is an unusual example, but in a sense, like sometimes the thing that we talk about these kind of image generation models, and I remember the episode where Amy Aisha Brown was on, and she was talking about how if you ask for a picture of an autistic child, it always brings up a sad white boy. So there was something built into the kind of biases there that I think what they've done is like turn the biases the opposite way.
Flipped it, yeah.
Anyway, that was the kind of, I think what everyone remembers is the kind of big mistake that Google made. And I think for a while they were kind of tarred by that.
They made a few faux pas, I think. And also it feels like, I mean, we're obviously really into it, so we probably sort of see every single piece of news, but it feels like Google are just very quiet in that respect. Like they're not, Claude has always been the best at coding. Grok is famous for being, complete like having no biases and no filters in there, no guardrails. Although most of them don't now anyway. And then ChatGPT is just famous for being the first and actually quite often been overall the best multimodal and most capable model overall.
Which I guess we're going to talk about a little bit later in the episode.
Yeah, totally. But whereas Google sort of have a USP on it almost in a way. I think the other
they still
thing
don't though, do they? Like that's even with this model. Like there's not. It's the best at everything. Which we've said to people a lot of time. Well, it doesn't really matter to you if it's the best because unless you're doing certain things, you've given the example of coding.
Yeah.
There will be other examples where people who have particular things they need to do. So I saw that programming, creative writing were two things that it was particularly good at. There'll be people who have specific use cases where they will definitely, sort of value it. But for most people, they wouldn't necessarily notice a difference. Maybe they notice it's quicker. And also there still isn't, in a way, a thing to bring you to the model. Apart from the fact it's free, I do question, because you've used it a lot more than me. Like when we say it's free, ChatGPT is free, but if I use ChatGPT, once I've done something for half an hour, it says you need to use the other model until 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. So is it free, like not unlimited, but for a reasonable amount of use, or is it free just for you to use it for 10 minutes and then it puts you onto Flash 1.5 or something?
I think right now it is basically unlimited, but I think it's because it's in some kind of developer preview mode right now. So by the time you get to use it, it might not be. The other amazing thing, which is genuinely amazing with Gemini 2.5 and specifically for coding, but for other stuff as well, is it's got a 1 million token context window, which is significantly
That's
larger
what I was
than
going to ask you. That was the thing that Gemini did have before, wasn't it? That actually was already a factor, but no one really talks about is it had a mass, even on I think 1.5, it had a bigger context window.
It was million, yeah.
Can you explain what that is for people, actually?
Yeah, so token, you can roughly equate a token to a word. It's not quite one for one, so like some words are made up of multiple tokens. But to keep it simple, if you think of as a token as being a word, then it's basically how many words it can retain in its memory before it almost like forgets the first one, so to speak. So with a lot of models, when they first came out, so when like GPT-3, I mean, I know we're going back a little way there, I think it had something like a 4,000 token context window, which is quite short if you think about 4,000 words, and actually it's probably more like 2,000 words. Then, after 2,000 words, it would start to, if you carried on the conversation, it would start to forget the things you were talking about first. Most models now have something like 120,000 token context windows as a maximum. And Google has 1 million tokens. And once you start get to 1 million tokens, then you're talking about being able to have a whole novel in its memory effectively.
Do you know what
it does? It really
3.7 sonnet is? Context window? Because I think I remember it was a big leap forward.
I'd have to look it up, but I still think it's probably maybe a quarter.
Wow.
So maybe 200,000 compared to Google's 1 million. And I think there's a version, I'm not sure this is the version that you can access for free, but I think they do have a 2 million context window version as well, so double it. So anyway, I mean, it's something that Google's models are already famous for. It also lends itself very much to coding. So it's not only the best model at coding, but like a long context window for coding is quite important because when you're using things like Cursor, you can end up having to especially as the code gets more complicated, as your code base gets more complicated, you can end up having to upload a lot of information into the context window every time you're talking to it.
The last point on this before we move on, I just remembered one other thing that was supposed to be, what it kind of excels at, and that was it's the reduced hallucinations down. Now, every model that's released now, one of the things that they talk about is how it's reduced hallucinations, and it seems like there is, a methodology that's being sort of generally applied. I mean, it hasn't stopped hallucinating, and I guess, in the near future they probably never will. And I think the reason for me it's kind of interesting is there is an acknowledgement. The fact that every model that comes out now is talking about reduced hallucination, there's an acknowledgement. It's a key thing to try and reduce down hallucinations. I don't know if you've noticed anything from using it. Like I've noticed that the recent models that have come out, they tend to be better at telling you when they're hallucinating or warning you about it, which kind of helps. But I don't know if you've noticed with Gemini 2.5 that there's a noticeable difference in hallucinations.
I haven't noticed that. The main thing I've noticed with Gemini 2.5 is it started telling me what to do, which is a bit mad. I think I was talking to you about this.
We thought we were a few years away from that, but we've already started, have we?
Yeah. So when I've been coding with it, it's like, because when you're coding with a model, it's sometimes you have to do stuff to help it do what it needs to do because it can't necessarily carry out. It's kind of an agentic thing. It can't necessarily carry out some actions for you. And so the other day when I was coding with it, it was asking me to carry out some actions on this online account for something I was using, and I basically hadn't realised that I needed to take these actions. So I told it that it wasn't working, and it reminded me that I needed to go and take some actions. And then later on in the same conversation, it started like adding reminders for user needs to do this, user needs to do that at the end of each conversation, just because it had basically picked up on the fact that I wasn't really paying attention.
Were you jet lagged?
Well, yeah.
Or was that pre-jet lag?
No, it was just the other day. So it was
okay, well that makes sense. It probably knew.
Yeah.
Nice. So should we talk about the new? Well, it is new, isn't it? The GPT, OpenAI's ChatGPT image generation model. I don't know what it's actually called, but it's now integrated with ChatGPT rather than being a kind of standalone.
Yeah. So, the big news here is everyone's decided Studio Ghibli is the
Ghibli.
Ghibli.
Or Ghibli.
Ghibli. Sorry,
definitely not Ghibli.
Is
you can
the
pronounce it either of the other ways.
Is the sort of it's the new trending. What's the word?
Viral.
Yeah, it's
Viral
the new
meme?
viral. Yeah, exactly. It's kind of a new meme. It's to do everything in Studio Ghibli style, using ChatGPT. So this has actually been in the news quite a lot. So if you haven't been under a rock, you've probably seen something about this. But yeah, GPT have released it's actually a phenomenal image.
OpenAI have released.
Sorry, OpenAI have released a new method of image generation, which takes much longer, but is actually pretty phenomenal. It's previous image generation stuff couldn't get text right. It couldn't spell things right.
You can edit these now completely perfectly. The text, you can write like a 22-line text prompt and it will take everything into account. Like it's another level, isn't it? It's a completely different level.
Yeah, totally. If you haven't had a chance to go with it, I think it's only on paid accounts, but it's pretty awesome. And some of the images it can produce, like proper, like just like next level. It doesn't actually use a diffusion model as far as I can tell, as far as anyone can tell, because it's actually closed source as usual from OpenAI. But apparently it doesn't use the standard diffusion model that's been used in almost all image generation for the last couple of years since this stuff came about. So I'd say just check it out. Like really, really, really impressive. If you haven't seen all the Studio Ghibli stuff online, I'm not saying that right.
No, you are. You are now.
I am now.
You are
okay.
now, yeah.
Studio Ghibli.
Yeah.
Anyway, apparently the creator of the Studio Ghibli stuff is absolutely horrified by it.
As I say, this is why the sort of
that.
irony of it, the fact that that's what's gone viral, is that he is literally the person who hates AI more than anyone in the world.
Yeah.
And thinks it's destroying the entire sort of industry and art that he loves. And it makes sense because he draws everything from hand, and that's why the Studio Ghibli stuff is, I mean, I don't know if most people listening will know what it is. Things like Spirited Away, Howl's Moving Castle, Totoro, I guess are the sort of famous ones, but everything is kind of hand drawn. The amount of frames that they have to draw to do it, it's like so labor intensive. Like kind of have just pushed back against any kind of technology to these really, really kind of authentic vintage style of cartoons, and now AI is basically just recreating it all. So it does seem kind of cruel that the viral thing that is, I mean, it is really cool. Like people are doing it. The main thing is like family pictures. So people get family pictures and do them. And it's not just Studio Ghibli style. You can actually choose specific films and it will do that. And it's not just that, like you can do it for anything, can't you? You can do like 1980s baseball,
people have been doing
baseball game. You can do any kind of theme that you want, and
Simpsons,
it's amazing.
South Park, whatever style you want. And the difference is, like, previous image generation models would sort of have a go at this, but they would like mess around with the picture. Like, so if like you say, if you had a family photo, previous models would sort of do some kind of really rough approximation, but generally like wouldn't really have any pass any resemblance. These ones look like it's genuinely like an artist has taken that photo and produced it in a different style, basically.
I don't know if you're aware of this, but because I was doing a bit of research for this earlier, and so previously when you used ChatGPT and you tried to create an image and use what's called DALL-E at the time, basically DALL-E wasn't integrated. So you'd give a prompt, and what it would essentially do is go and send that prompt into DALL-E and then pull the image back in. Like, it wasn't integrated. Now it's integrated. 4.0, I think, is the model that it uses. So it's not using the most up-to-date model, but it now has access to all of 4.0's training data to help it to create the image. And that's one of the reasons why this is better. And there was a couple of examples I'd given. Someone said, create an image that shows why San Francisco is foggy, and it created an image. It was able to reference 4.0 to find out why San Francisco is foggy, and then to put that into then a kind of educational image. Whereas before, you would have had to say, you could say, make me an image of San Francisco that is foggy, but if you wanted it to explain why, it couldn't, because the image couldn't reference training data. The image could just follow your text prompt.
Right.
There was another example which I wasn't that blown away by this until they kind of explained it, that they asked it to create this comic book based on a unicorn with an upside down horn. And they said every other image creation tool out there will turn the horn the right way up.
Just can't do it.
It couldn't do it. But this one, with this whole thing, kept the horn the wrong way.
Right.
Now, that doesn't sound that phenomenal, but the point here is that, when you're prompting it to do things, it's not kind of limited in the same way. You gave the example of text. I think for me, that has been the biggest thing with image generation, is even the best ones that promised that the text would be perfect, it wasn't perfect. It had got better, but it would still make mistakes with text. You still saw the kind of, not so much the kind of six fingers on girls, but there was still a bit of that to some degree, the making mistakes. These images are like, you can kind of create what you want to do. It sort of feels sad in a way that, I think
it diminishes art even more.
It diminishes art even more, and it's better, but it is incredibly fun, and it's good enough that you can use it, I guess, for actual practical uses. So it's not now just a pure novelty tool. The quality of it is good enough. You can use it for, I think, things which are genuinely kind of worthwhile and will make time savings, or make things better than they were previously. So although I have a kind of sadness for what this is doing to art, because I think it is taking away. I don't think it's destroying it, but I think it's taking away. It does also have like a lot of merits.
Yeah, for sure. And like I mean, so you could create logos previously, but not if they had text in them, really. Like now, you can just create whatever logo you want, and it'll work.
We said we need to update our logo. This is our 50th episode, so maybe we'll use the image generation to sex up our current logo rather than creating a completely new one. Just pimp it out and pimp it up a little bit
with a bit of GPT-4o love. So DeepSeek, I know literally nothing about this, so I'm quite intrigued.
Well, we did an episode on DeepSeek, then we did an episode that episode on DeepSeek was our most popular episode since the first episode, which is pretty awful. I wish people would stop listening to the first episode. And then we said we'd stop talking about DeepSeek, so we did a second episode about DeepSeek, and then I think we did another episode just after where we also talked a lot about DeepSeek. So I don't want to talk about DeepSeek anymore, but we need to talk about DeepSeek again, because their impact, I think, is still kind of resonating and is still creating kind of effects that this is about DeepSeek, but it's also a kind of China and chips and kind of Huawei piece. So the first bit, DeepSeek have brought out V3.1, which is a non-reasoning model. So this is not the kind of, there is going to be, I think, R3 or R2? R2. Is it R1 or R2?
So the first one was R1, yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway, there's going to be a new reasoning model, which apparently is going to kind of potentially be at the top again, and there's all this kind of expectation. But V3.1 is not that. V3.1 is an upgrade on their original model, which was released in December when no one actually heard about it, which was version 3. For the technical stuff, so it's got transformer-based architecture, 560 billion parameters. It uses that mixture of experts model. It has support for a context window of 1 million tokens, so it matches Gemini 2.5. Like I said, this is not a reasoning model, but it shows, really, really high performance. Support for 100 languages with near native proficiency. It has apparently demonstrated 38% reduction in hallucinations. So again, talking about reduction in hallucinations, but those of you who listened to the model episode will remember me saying that DeepSeek was the sort of worst at hallucinating. So that is a big thing.
I like the statistic, a 38% reduction in hallucinations.
Yeah,
I know. That sounds like a hallucination in itself.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah. But also, 62% of hallucinations are still there. That also sounds not that impressive. To be honest,
I suppose so. It depends what percentage it had before.
But then I researched this on Perplexity, so it could be a Perplexity hallucination.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, I'll believe it.
But enterprise customers have API use of it. It has apparently a Chrome extension that's coming out. And the one thing that I kind of wanted to talk about here, because it's something I've noticed in the last few weeks. So I talked a few times on the podcast about how being in China, about the difference in the way that AI is integrated with stuff, and that AI is integrated with a lot of things that it's not integrated with in other countries, but that we didn't really have people using chatbots on their phones or iPads or whatever in the same way as we did in the West with sort of ChatGPT and Claude and things like that, and how DeepSeek was what had kind of really pushed that into the mainstream. The other thing that I've noticed recently is DeepSeek in China is integrated in everything. Everything. You go into Baidu Maps. Baidu Maps is this sort of equivalent of Google Maps here, and you've got a DeepSeek logo, and you click on it, and there's an AI feature. It is crazy. And talking to friends who are, relatively senior in companies or who run their own businesses, or people who are working in sort of accounting and stuff like that, and they're all talking about we've got AI integrated, they've got DeepSeek integrated in this, and we're like, it only came out 2 months ago, and it's just integrated in everything. It more and more makes me question this idea that DeepSeek is this bunch of guys in a cupboard with a few GPUs. I mean, that was sort of proven to be nonsense. They had a lot of money, but that this was a side project. I'm pretty sure the Chinese Communist Party is, if they weren't backing them now, then they're certainly backing them now, but they've got a lot more behind them than we thought, because the way in which they brought that model out was kind of shocking. It shook the foundations of the American companies. It's kind of brought open source forward. It's changed, which we're going to talk about in a minute, but it's changed the way OpenAI are potentially going to do things. They're potentially going to go back to being a bit more open. It's been phenomenal, but we kind of said that with the models themselves, well, actually, it's not that the model is that much better. That's the key point. It's the economics. It's how cheap it is. It's how efficient it is. I think the way you're seeing this integration kind of shows that. The examples that I was giving are maybe the kind of business, some of these, like I say, are big businesses. Some of them are not that big, and they're talking about, we've got AI integrated with DeepSeek, is it's so much cheaper that maybe this is the thing that businesses that previously would be they might have thought about it, but they're not sure, they're not quite sure if it's the right time. Now it's so cheap with DeepSeek. And it seems that DeepSeek must have just gone on this massive charm offensive. Again, to do all this stuff, I think they've got a lot more, people working with them and sales and etc. to get that integrated. But it's phenomenal. Have a look. You maybe don't use as many Chinese apps as me, But if you look on Chinese apps now, you'll just see DeepSeek integrated all over the place. WeChat, DeepSeek integration. I'm not sure if it's there now, but there's supposed to be a way you can use it through the through the mini app. I'm pretty sure they're using it on the background of, delivery apps, everything like that. It's crazy. And they've got this new model coming, which, even if it's not the best model, I think it will be up there, and it will be cheap, and it will have there's going to be something about it.
Oh yeah, and I think the way these things work is they obviously develop the standard model first, and then they add the reasoning later, it's the same for the other companies. It's weird to talk about it that, because reasoning in itself is something that's only a few months old. On that point, I do wonder. It's something I don't think we'll ever know. I wonder. I wonder. I think there's three possible scenarios. I think one of them is that the Western companies like OpenAI were already looking at reasoning, but were basically, for want of a better word, sandbagging, and they were just.
I think that,
they were just,
I think that's definitely
they were just
true.
keeping it behind. They were keeping it back so they could release things more slowly, and then the release of R1 has kind of made all these other companies release these thinking models straight away. The other option, which I think is less likely, is that it just completely caught them by surprise and they've scrambled to catch up and hadn't even thought of reasoning models, which I think is less likely. I think they probably...
But they got their act together afterwards pretty quick. I think they must have.
A week or something, yeah.
I think they must have.
And I don't know what the third option was. I'm tired and jet lagged.
You've mentioned that. Yeah. The thing with DeepSeek that is kind of, for me, is so, I don't want to say amazing, but
it is still amazing that they did it without access to the best hardware, which is what all they don't have. Well, I mean, maybe they do have the best chips, and they've just got them through back channels.
That's the thing, that they've innovated in a way that even if it involved some degree of copying from ChatGPT, and there are various kind of accusations of how they did it, even if they did all that, even if they still had to innovate to find a way to do it cheaper, and to do this inference cheaper, and to find a way to make it more efficient. I mean, they're also in terms of how they're advancing. So V3 that was released in December, that's the one just before, that had 128,000 tokens. And now it's 1 million. Just the leap forward in terms of how quickly they've kind of made that leap is just
they seem to be
staggering.
They seem to have basically leveled the playing field almost immediately. And who knows? I mean, it's possible that R2, the next reasoning model they release, which probably won't be that far away, might leapfrog everything again. I don't know. It's really interesting. For a while it looked like OpenAI were going to have the very best models almost all the time, and they don't seem to anymore. It's Gemini is the best model now. Claude was for a while. It just seems to be switching hands all the time right now. And I think OpenAI, well, maybe they didn't have the most resources available to them. Clearly xAI and Google obviously do have enormous resources available to them. I haven't heard from Llama for a while. It's possible we'll get a new open source model from Llama tomorrow that is better than all these models. I don't know.
So I was listening to Nate Whitmore's podcast the other day, and he was talking about a kind of theory that what China is potentially doing here is, where the US had the lead in terms of those closed source models and the kind of software side of it that they could sell to people, is by open sourcing and kind of just throwing that out, it kind of gets rid of the ability for US to kind of lead and generate all the revenue through that, because it's all kind of open source. And then China at some point later can pick up what it does well, which is creating the kind of hardware, not necessarily the top end chips, but, selling the actual physical stuff and creating it. And it makes a lot of sense. It absolutely makes a lot of sense. How they did things previously is follow the same kind of model, because it does feel like the closed source models, maybe it was never going to, it was never in the long run going to work, because you've always said they're not that far behind. But DeepSeek was the thing that has kind of shaken that up. And there was also and this is not just in one place, there's a lot of this, even people like Mark Andreessen, who, were saying previously that the US was like 2 years ahead of China, and now they're saying, oh, it's 3 to 6 months in some areas, and in some areas it's probably level, and in some very specific areas China may even be ahead. Like it's like how quickly it's made that up is absolutely crazy. And a lot of this is driven, and credit to people like Grace Shao, and Christy Loke, who we've had on this podcast for kind of talking about this stuff, well before we thought about it. But a lot of this stuff has happened because of chip controls, and because the US has kind of driven this innovation.
Yeah, they've pushed them into a corner where they've had to innovate, and there are a lot of smart people. Like, you have to. It's been talked about a lot recently. Like, people have still got. I think there's a misconception that China is still in this place where it's copying the West, where that was the case, and it still is in some areas. Like, it definitely still is in some areas, but they're also innovating and starting to really, really catch up, and even lead in some areas. I mean, the classic example right now is electric cars. It's got nothing to do with AI, but like electric cars, China went from catching up to now leading. Basically, they have some of the cheapest and best electric cars on the planet.
But I can give you AI examples. I mean, I said to you, I was in Wuhan a few months ago, and there are, plenty of self-driving taxis on the road there. I know there are some in the US, but there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
In Wuhan, it's not the only city that has that. There are examples in Shenzhen, which is the sort of tech hub just over the border from Hong Kong. Drone delivery services are apparently just kind of the norm there. They're happening.
Really?
When I say the norm, I'm not saying like every delivery is taking place via a drone, but it's
becoming common.
It's there. That kind of the low altitude economy is a big part of China's 5-year plan. It's a massive thing. I mean, they're already talking about autonomous helicopter transport in the next helicopter taxis, autonomous helicopter taxis in the next 5 years or so in parts of China. Like, there's some phenomenal stuff. I wanted to talk about Huawei actually, because I think this is kind of important in terms of like it's Huawei's chip technology that is contributing a lot towards this. So because of those sanctions, Huawei are basically, they're not an SOE, but they're basically the national tech company of China now, let's be honest. They've got these chips, the Ascend 910C, which is designed to rival NVIDIA H100s. They're not as good as obviously the very top chip, but I think the point is where we thought previously is like you have to have the absolute top chip. With the improvements in the architecture that we've seen from the likes of DeepSeek, is like they need chips, but they don't necessarily need the very top chip. There's also some talk 40% of NVIDIA's revenues apparently may come from China, not necessarily directly, but because a lot of chips are sold to Vietnam and Singapore, and they're then illegally kind of exported into China that way. So I don't know. I mean, maybe that means like there are more NVIDIA top end chips in China than there's supposed to be.
Yeah.
But it definitely feels like this sort of Huawei have really, really been pushed to innovate and create these kind of better chips. And I'm wondering for the first time, it's not like is China going to win? Because I don't think there is like a winner. It's not like going to the moon. It's like one gets there.
No.
Okay, if we got to the moon, but whatever.
No, but are they?
And then that's it. But it's like, can they be ahead at some point, and can they be neck and neck and pushing forward and going backwards? I think probably they can.
Well, they seem to. Yeah, in general, in AI, they seem to be roughly in that kind of space. I don't know. Like being 3 months behind doesn't seem that.
And they're collaborating with DeepSeek, and it feels like it's the DeepSeek Huawei collaboration that is the kind of key thing in terms of what China. But also, if you're 3 months behind, that's basically effectively not really behind at all. 2 years behind is significant. 2 years behind could mean by the time you've caught up, the game's over. Okay, but is it because
2 or 3 months behind?
Yeah, but is it because 6 months ago? No, not 6 months ago. 3 months ago, China was 2 years behind apparently, and now it's 3 months behind or not. So like the point is like when people say they're 2 years behind or they're 6 months, is like, well, if they were 2 years behind, but then 2 months later they were 3 months behind, they were obviously never 2 years behind.
No,
like it's all kind of like it's just a figure thrown out there, isn't it?
They clearly weren't. They clearly weren't, but I guess they were.
They're 2 years behind in what people knew about.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Like at that point, DeepSeek hadn't come out and no one had seen anything like this. So I think it was just more that they showed their hand, so to speak. But what I mean is, like pundits thought they were 2 years behind, and the difference between being 2 years behind and 3 months behind is like basically you're out of the game versus like you're neck and neck.
Right, so in terms of like the choreography of this episode, this is a bit of a balls up because I'm going to talk about OpenAI again, which I probably should have talked about when we talked about the OpenAI model. But anyway, it's a different point.
But you could just move this bit before the other bit, and then the bit you've just said won't make any sense.
Yeah. So if I've done that and this makes no sense, that's why we've done it. Yeah. If not, then well, either way, it won't make complete sense. But good idea.
Correct.
So OpenAI. Apparently, I haven't actually looked at the tweet or X. What is a tweet called if it's on X? Is it called an X?
Yeah, I think it's an X. Is it?
You say, I did an X. You say, I X'd it. Or do you still say I tweeted it, but on X?
I don't know, actually. I think it's an X.
Okay. Well, on X, someone either tweeted or X'd. No, sorry, someone didn't. The devil himself, Sam Altman, did. To say that OpenAI plans to release a new open weight model. Open weight is basically an open source model. We've discussed this, like the difference in semantics between the two, but for clarity, an open source model, it will be the first open source model since GPT-2 in 2019. I then looked this up because I thought, let me check that actually was an open source model. It wasn't an open source model when they first released it. So it seems like OpenAI have never actually been that open. But they did make it open afterwards. So anyway, they are going to release a open source model. We don't know if it will be the best model. We don't know why they're releasing a model and not saying what it is, but this is in line with their usual bullshit. Let's release 20 models at the same time thing that they were supposed to not do. But this is a massive thing because it is, and I guess is why maybe the DeepSeek coming before this kind of makes sense, is OpenAI, the company who were all about being open, that were the least open company, have now been pushed to the point where they are going to release open source models. Is this the end of closed source models?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Like, I mean, I think Google's model is still proprietary in that sense, and Claude is as well, but it feels like it's moving more in the direction of open source. I don't know why OpenAI are doing this, but I think it feels like they're just confused at the moment. Like everything they do is just a bit odd, and a bit sort of disjointed. Like GPT 4.5 was clearly released hastily, in my opinion. It wasn't the best at anything, and the argument for releasing it was it's like a bit more personable or something like that.
Yeah, it was bullshit, wasn't it?
They obviously like released all their, DeepSeek came out, and then they released. Well, they already had a thinking model, but they released they opened it up so you could see what it was saying, see what it was thinking. But then not as much as DeepSeek did. So they just seem sort of a bit baffled at the moment, a bit lost. The most exciting thing for me is the new image generation model, which actually genuinely seems cool, but then hasn't had a massive hype around it.
Yeah, it hasn't had a big fanfare around its release in a way, has it?
No. And they still have this weird thing which they said they were going to tidy up, but they still have this weird thing where when you try and use it, you have to choose between 6 different models or 8 different models, and depending on which one you choose, you can use different features. So you can use deep research and search and image generation. They only work with certain versions, and it's really not clear.
Ironically, that deep research is probably the most phenomenal thing, and that seems to have, like, obviously it has been announced, but that seems to have kind of flown under the radar a bit.
Yeah.
Right? We talked about it a little bit, but that's pretty amazing. I just had a quick look at a bit more detail. So it's the open weight model is a reasoning model, so it's going to be similar to OpenAI's O3 mini model, apparently. So, well, also similar to O1, so a reasoning model. Multilingual problem solving, so it will be in multiple languages. Developers can access and modify the model's trained parameters, the weights, without needing the original training data, which facilitates customization. And just to clarify, because I actually wasn't 100% sure, but open weights apparently is halfway between open source and closed. So it gives transparency in how the models make connections, but it doesn't reveal all of the code or the training data. So that's the sort of main difference, I guess.
Yeah, that's the whole thing about being able to make... So basically, open weights...
change the underlying... You can't change the sort of base...
the base model in that sense, but you can't see what it's been trained on, but you can fine tune it, right? Because the open weights means you can fine tune it.
I was just thinking, we keep slagging off I just slag off OpenAI because of Sam Altman. I don't actually dislike OpenAI itself, but we keep slagging them off for being closed source. But then Anthropic Claude, which we love, is also closed source. So Anthropic, if you're listening, do the right thing.
Does actually, yeah, that was my question. Is there any indication as to why they've done this from what you saw?
I mean, there is an indication in the tweet from what I can see, but when DeepSeek came out, when DeepSeek R1 came out, Sam Altman literally within a day or two said, yeah, we don't want to be on the wrong side of history. We think open source is the way forward, which was absolutely, like, quite obviously just a purely reactionary thing. So I think it is directly a response to DeepSeek, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that all these companies do need to open source. I don't know what the benefit to OpenAI of open sourcing their
publicity
models are, but maybe publicity. Like, in some ways, I don't really mind whether they are or not. I think for me, the argument of open source is almost as much about having competition as it is about having open source models. And my fear, like if you went back like a year or two ago, like 18 months ago, my fear was that everything was going to be concentrated in like one or two big tech companies. Yeah. And it feels like with the release of DeepSeek, that's just blown that out of the water.
I still don't buy that the OpenAI model that they're giving to, the DoD is not a better model, or the DeepSeek model they're giving to the PLA in China is not a better model. Yeah, so when we say that these are like, they're open sourcing instead of closed source, like they're not open sourcing the best models. Even Grok, have said that they will open source sort of 6 months after they've released it. So by that point, they're basically waiting to release a new one. So it does feel like even officially they are not open sourcing from day one. And I think we know now, we talked a while ago about how it was the only technology in history where the kind of commercial public operation was ahead of the military one. I'm pretty sure we're not in that space anymore.
No, I don't think so. I think it'd be quite delusional to think that, really.
So let's finish off with an honourable mention, Jimmy.
Yeah, so Runway, I think this came out, this is the most recent drop actually, it was in the last 24 hours or so. But the Runway ML4 has come out, which is the latest version of a video generation model, which so Runway has always been like one of the best. And the latest one, I mean, I'll be honest, like video generation is still one of the areas where it's obviously really difficult to do and very computationally expensive if you imagine creating an image and then multiplying that by, 30 frames a second, 60 frames a second. But it is making really good progress. I think the best way to check this out is definitely not listening to a podcast because it's video generation. So I think if you want to have a look, check out some of the latest stuff that can be done with Runway 4. It does look really cool, and I think you have to pay for it. But if you want to have a go with it, it's some of the stuff it can do now.
Is it the best?
So it looks, Sora. It's really weird because Sora came out ages ago, but then never actually came out. This was like a sort of like side project of OpenAI. It has come out now. Runway is definitely comparable, if not better, than Sora. It still can only generate like 20-second clips. The people I've seen talking about it are doing that whole, this is the worst it will ever be thing, and they're right. I don't know how excited to get about this because they're still...
It's only moved from 10 seconds to 20 in a year, which like, okay, that's a year, it's doubled, but it also is like, I'm pretty sure we talked at one point about, or I think you said at one point, like in 2 years' time, you'll be able to make a whole Star Wars film. It might be a little bit, it might be a bit longer.
Yeah, and that's what people are still talking about. So I think they will crack video generation at some point, and then you will be able to do things like that. I mean, just to elaborate on a little bit. So one of the things that previous video generation models were bad at was like the consistency between frames. So you would have like, so for example, with the new model, you can have something like if you've got if your main subject is in the background and you've got stuff passing in front of them in the foreground, like imagine you've like got it's like panning and you've got trees or lampposts or other stuff like passing in the foreground. The new model can retain like the consistency. The example I saw the other day was like, it was a bloke who had a crease on his shirt in a specific pattern, and like a lamppost passed between the camera and the subject. And when after it passed, there was like total consistency with the before and after. And again, this is much easier to like watch a video of it online to see what I'm talking about. But that kind of thing was something that video generation models previously really struggled with, that kind of temporal consistency. And so it's just another step in the right direction. I'll be honest, like if you watch the videos, there's still obvious mistakes in places. There's still like things that are just like clearly wrong and messed up, a bit like the 6 fingers in photos like a year ago. But one to keep an eye on still.
Cool. Well, less than an hour. That's good going for us. I think we thought this was going to be half an hour, but it never is. So thanks for listening, everyone. As usual, take care. Have a good week.
She drives me crazy. Yeah, she's my Gemini, baby. She's my Gemini, baby. There's nobody like her. She drives me crazy. Yeah, she's my Gemini, baby. She's my Gemini, baby. There's nobody like her. She drives me crazy. Yeah, she's my Gemini, baby. She's my Gemini, baby. There's nobody like her. She drives me crazy. Yeah, she's my Gemini, baby. But remember, it's only a matter of time until she gets the breeze. But remember, it's only a matter of time until she gets replaced. But remember, it's only a matter of time until she gets replaced.